Tonight, we get the origin of the newest Green Lantern, Simon Baz, and it sure does start off with a bang. Superman has lost his cape and doesn't know where to find it. And who is the Phantom Stranger? I mean, I figured it out in like 30 seconds, so it's not that hard. All that and more tonight on the Not-So-New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 53 of the Not-So-New 52. I am your host and it's the start of a new year. Woo! I mean, not like calendar-wise, but for me personally on this show. And as such, for anybody watching the video version, just a few things I want to get out of the way real quick. My stacks of comics. If you have seen any prior episodes, they used to be a lot higher. Well, now they're not, and part of that is because I'm moving soon and have to pack away that stuff, but the other part of it is I want these stacks to reflect how many episodes I'm doing. So currently, between the two of them, there are 53 trade paperbacks in these stacks. I will be adding one more for every episode for the rest of this show. So by the time we hit the end, you will no longer be able to see me through all of the comics. That's the goal, at least. Anyway, additionally, I have changed some of the other things on screen. Not too much there, but you may notice a couple little differences. That's only for the video people. For the audio people, you get nothing special. Nothing has changed. Check out the video version. Anyway, let's talk about the comics that are coming out this week. It is 0 month, and this is the first week of it, so we have a whole bunch of number 0 issues going over the origins of a bunch of different characters. This week we have Detective Comics, Batwing, Action Comics, Green Lantern, Earth 2, Green Arrow, World's Finest, GI Combat, Stormwatch, Anal Man, Dial H, Swamp Thing, and the number 0 issue of a brand new series, The Phantom Stranger. Additionally, we have the number 7 issue of Night Force, which is the final issue of that. And yeah, that's basically it. I mean, there is a lot to go through because all of these origin things seemingly unravel new mysteries that I didn't even know needed to be answered. So let's not waste any more time and jump right into 0 month. Detective Comics number 0, written by Gregg, Hurwitz, art by Tony S. Daniel. We pick up 10 years ago in the Himalayas. There's a knock at the door of this fortress-looking thing, and we see that Bruce Wayne is the one knocking. He's looking for a Zen Buddhist monk warrior named Shihan Masuda, and the woman who opens the door says, "That's a myth, doesn't exist, bye," slams the door in his face. So then Bruce goes down to the foot of the steps and meditates for what seems to be 2 straight days before finally he's let in by Shihan Matsuda, who actually does exist. 6 months pass, and Bruce is training with a sword cutting up coconuts a la Fruit Ninja, and Shihan's like, man, that sucks. You're awful. You're never going to make it work here. So then we see Bruce is sent into town in order to pick up some groceries, and he runs into this girl who's being berated by, I'm assuming, her father, the shop owner. Her name is Mio, and Bruce immediately takes a liking to her, despite never talking to her at all. Once he makes it back up to Shihan Masuda's place, they get into this discussion of like, oh, Bruce, well, you've been studying here for 9 months now. How are you liking things? And Bruce is like, oh, it's hard work, but I feel like I'm finally making some headway. And honestly, Shihan, you've become a bit of a father to me. And this woman, your wife, has become a bit of a mother. And he's like, well, that's not going to do. I'm not your dad. Stop thinking that. And then he storms out. And then we get later on training where apparently there's some black fog or something which represents all of humanity's like ills, and Bruce has to take them in, inhale them, and then expel his own light, his own joy from his own body. He is just a person who takes in all the hate of the world while not having any for himself. And Bruce is like, wouldn't it make more sense for me to spread love by like having joy in my heart? And he's like, no, it's not how this works. So then later on that night, he goes in and the woman stops him and He's like, so how goes the meditation? And he's like, actually, he's saying something about me getting rid of all my joy. And the woman's like, no, it's not about distance from emotion. It's not about getting rid of that. It's about being able to push past your emotion. You're still supposed to be able to feel. Don't block yourself from it. Be full of it, but then push past it. So then we see Bruce is being trained in like this icy tundra, and he's supposed to be able to overcome like his physical desire to chatter and shiver and stuff like that. And he's unable to do so because he's got Mio in mind. And the monk Buddhist guy just chews him out and be like, you got to give up all that. If you fall in love, if you have any sort of attachments, it's only a weakness. You got to be more than that. So he heads back into town and once again meets up with Mio. And Mio this time passes him a note saying, meet me in the gardens tomorrow. So that night he is lying awake in bed looking at a watch that I guess belonged to his father. And once again, the Buddhist guy comes in and is just like, let go of your attachments, Bruce. They will be nothing but harmful to you. You're designed for so much more. So then we see him hanging out with Mio the next day, and they're watching the clouds go by, just having a nice time. And Mio jokingly like takes his watch off of his hand, and Bruce immediately flips. He's like, give that back. You don't know. Sorry, this was a mistake. I should go. So he just leaves her sitting alone. Next day, he's back at the ice training, and he is finally able to overcome his physical stuff because I guess he's put Mio behind him. But then that night, he's talking to the wife again, and the wife is saying, like, my husband is like an unemotional prick. You really shouldn't be like him. I know that you want to do this thing, but, like, what is it going to cost you in terms of your life? Like, share it with someone else and be happy. So that night he's lying awake again thinking about Mio, and in the middle of the night he gets up, runs out in a storm over to Mio's house, knocks on her window. It's just like, please, I will leave the window open for you tonight. Come back to my place and we will make love until the sun rises. In less words, but pretty much what he's saying. So that night he leaves the window open, and a ninja breaks in and stabs his teacher through the chest. Bruce immediately wakes up, takes out the ninja, and unmasks the ninja to discover it's Mio. She had betrayed him, was a plant the whole time, and it was all being planned by the wife, who was so pissed off at her husband for being an unemotional prick and also wanted a big amount of money that he had. She stabs him through the chest again and goes after Bruce. But before Bruce is able to be attacked, Shihan sits up and uses a throwing knife to kill his own wife. And so Bruce is holding his master in his hands, and the master's like, let this be a lesson to you, Bruce. Bitches be crazy. Again, in more or less words. But that's the story. I get it. I understand the desire to have a story of here's why Bruce is so closed off, but I feel like his whole trauma with his parents dying was more than enough to do that. I don't think we needed another story of no, but here's why romantically he's closed off. And I'm okay, I guess. It's not bad. It's not a bad story at all. Art-wise, it's pretty good. There's a few issues here or there. It did feel a little bit rushed, just in terms of we're setting up this entire new character that we've never met, and then also going through the arc and killing him all in the same thing. But it's fine. It's an okay enough story. Overall, I guess I'd probably give it a 6.5. It's an okay... It's not Batman's origin, but it is an early Batman story. So I see the point of putting it into the 0 issue. It just has a couple flaws that keep it from being anything fantastic. Batwing number 0, written by Judd Winick, art by Marcus Toe. We have already seen some flashbacks to David Zavimbe's history as a child soldier. This basically is just the in-between of after he was a child soldier and up to being Batwing. So several years ago, David had broke out in the middle of the night from the rehabilitation home that he was put in, and he's basically just beating up a bunch of gangs around South Africa. And the heads of the rehabilitation center, Mateus and a woman named Renee Diallo, they come up in a Humvee and they're like, David, what are you? Stop beating them up. You're going to kill them. And Renee's like, he's not going to kill them. He'd never kill them. He's just going to beat them until they wish they were dead. So they end up getting a hold on him, and he's, like, they were beating up a girl. They deserve it, da-da-da. And they're just like, hey, we get it. We totally do. But you definitely need a better outlet for this anger and this hatred. So years pass, and David joins the police force. He's a rookie on the force, and one of his other officers comes up with a stack of money saying, like, oh, here's your cut of the share, David. And he's like, this was a burglary. This was a robbery. Like, this cash should be returned to the person it was taken from. And it's like, oh, yeah, it will be, but this is our cut of it, so here you go. So immediately he's complaining to Renee, saying how corrupt the police force is. And she's like, yeah, no, they're all awful, but that's why you need to be better. You need to be, like, the good guy, and that can go your own path there. So night comes, and Mateus and Renee are driving, and they're talking about David, saying, like, maybe being on the police isn't the best place for him. After all, he is filled with so much rage. And Renee's like, that's literally all we've got right now. I'm sure something else will happen, but this is where he's able to fight back against this crime that he's so vigilant against. And before they can continue this conversation, their car is attacked by a metahuman who has some energy blasts and devil horns, and the car pretty much explodes. So we cut to David storming into the hospital, looking to see what happened to them. Mateus is in critical condition. Turns out he's probably going to lose an eye, a la why he has an eye patch now, but Renee is on life support, and it's not looking good for her. So David's by her bedside, and he swears vengeance. He's like, I will make them pay. He finds out that the name of the guy is Death Jack, and he's trying to become like a budding crime lord ever since he got some superpowers. So David puts on a disguise, just a bandana and goggles over his head, and finds out where he is and heads in with 2 swords and gets ready for vengeance. And he takes him out pretty handily, but he still refuses to kill him. Sorry, they aren't swords, but they're like, they have sword handles, but they're dull. So I don't know what you call that. Training swords, I guess. Batons. Regardless, he takes him out and strings him up after he's been bloodied significantly for the police force to take care of. And we see that he keeps this up. He keeps on doing it, even after Death Jack. He keeps on fighting against criminals because Renee did end up dying. He's swearing vengeance in front of her grave, but he realizes, like, this is probably not what you wanted from me, but this is what I'm going to be doing. So he ends up actually finding a whole lot of metahumans that were springing up around this time, people with some form of superpowers. And he also discovered that there are other people who, like him, that don't have superpowers, are still willing to fight this fight. So he even has a little team put together. They don't have a name, but you can see them all fighting against, like, bigger bads that David probably wouldn't be able to do himself. So one day Mateus comes in and sees that David is benching himself up, and he's telling him, like, hey, look, you probably shouldn't be doing this. I hope you understand that. Like, you're just one man. You're going up against literal, like, monsters and armies out there. And he's like, yeah, they may be monsters, but so am I. So we then see another night where he goes out, sets fire to some drug lords' cars, and then starts beating them up. And as he's doing so, he's purposely leaves one of them conscious and tells him, like, go back to your boss, tell him that I'm here and I'm never going to make things easy for him. And as he does so, shadow of Batman appears over him, and he's like, hey, I like the cut of your jib. I like what you're doing here. Maybe I can help. So he flies Mateus and Batwing out to Gotham City, blindfolds him to get down into the Batcave, and basically just shows him off and says, like, here's the deal. Batman Incorporated. I'm getting Batman from all these different countries, and I want you to be a Batman. And he's like, okay, yeah, that's cool. But why me? Like, there's other heroes. There's the whole kingdom in Africa. Why am I the one you choose? And he's like, because I see a little bit of you, or me, in you. What with the whole losing a family member and vengeance thing. That's kind of really important to that man part. And he's like, okay, but here's the deal. I'm out in Africa. I can't, like, jump from high buildings to glide everywhere. That's not really feasible. And he's like, oh, don't worry, I got something for you. And we show the Batwing suit with propulsion tech and everything like that. And he's like, will this be sufficient? And Batwing's like, hell yeah. So yeah, that's how Batwing got to where he was. I mean, it makes perfect sense. It's a pretty clear cause and effect. We knew that he was a child soldier, and we knew he had this rage inside him. He wanted to get better, and so he just turned it against crime rather than continuing the war effort. So, yeah, it makes perfect sense from a character standpoint that it continues on how it did. I don't really have any complaints about it. The only thing that I kind of am iffy on is the fact that it was just like Batman was just there and was just like, oh yeah, this guy, sure, we'll pick him. I'm positive that back when Batman Incorporated first started before the New 52, they probably gave that a lot more time, but I didn't read that, so I'm just going off what I know, and this just seems a little bit fast to me. It's a good little character beat to say, like, here's why David is the way he is, but it's the actual Bat part of it, the actual part where he became a superhero, is just a little bit lacking, but it's a very tiny part of the story. I don't really mind it that much. So overall, I'd say this one is probably a 7. Good overall, not really anything stand out, just a decent little origin story for Batwing. Action Comics number 0, written by Grant Morrison, art by Ben Oliver. This follows Superman pretty much, I guess, as soon as he gets into Metropolis. So we see him placing the order for 200 t-shirts for Superman's t-shirt look. And then he goes to the Daily Star and gets a job as a reporter there. Just showing him getting all set up. And then we see him playing video games with Jimmy Olsen. And apparently they've been living together briefly. And Jimmy has this crazy huge apartment because I guess his parents are like rich, but like his father walked out on them, and then his mom took care of him. He was raised like poorly, and then when his mom died, his father took him back in, and this is his way of apologizing, is buying him extravagant things. So more of an origin story for Jimmy Olsen than anything else. But regardless, Clark makes the point like, "Hey Jimmy, you know Lois Lane, right? Maybe you could get a meeting with me." And he's like, "Not a chance. Lois would not be interested in meeting you, Clark. Sorry, that's the one thing that'll never change here in the city of tomorrow." So then we get a glimpse of Superman on top of a building where there's, I guess, a hostage situation going on, and there's a helicopter nearby, and Superman just takes down their helicopter, and he's like, "Hey guys, what's going on here?" And they all start firing on him. He's just blocking all their shots with his cape. Apparently is bulletproof. And they fire off a RPG at him, which hits him square on the chest, which does end up knocking him off the building. But he's alive. He's fine. But he crashes down the alley below. And when he gets down there, a kid comes by and he's like, "Whoa, mister, you okay?" And he takes Superman's cape and runs off with it. So half the story is devoted to that kid. But anyway, we go to Jimmy and Lois, who I guess saw the entire thing happening. I genuinely don't see where they could have gotten that vantage point, but they did see it all happening. And they're trying to pitch it to Perry, saying like, this dude took a bunch of guns and an RPG to the face, and he literally like jumped up. Like he jumped from the alley to on top of a building. This dude's a superhero. And Perry's like, I need more proof than some blurry images. You got to give me something more than that. But they do have an emblem of his, or they do have a picture of his emblem from his cape. And they're like, all right, well, it's an S, Mr. S. What does the S stand for? Find that out. So cut to the kid. He's headed back home, I guess. And when he steps in, his father is abusing not only, it looks like his mother, but also his son. Or I guess the other guy's brother. And he steps in, he's like, leave him alone. And the father comes at the kid with a knife. And the knife just snaps off as it hits Superman's cape. So then the kid just rounds up a punch and punches his dad in the stomach. And then takes his brother out of the apartment somewhere safe. So then we go to Clark getting into his apartment. And it's the same Mrs. Nixley who is showing. It's like, oh, yeah, we got all types of weirdos here. It's going to be fine. And she recounts how her husband was a magician who is basically in a coma because some rival magician messed with his trick. So he's been in a coma for 7 years. And apparently his trademark appearance was a purple bowler's hat or bowling hat. So that's something to keep track of. But regardless, he ends up checking into his room. He only has a single bag, and he's like, all right, let's do this. And he unzips his hoodie to show the Superman t-shirt underneath. So then we go down to a train yard where the kids are, I guess, running away to. And the older brother who has the cape is like, with this cape, nothing's ever going to hurt us. We're going to be fine. But the dad managed to track them down, and he's, of course, been drinking. And he comes up to him and says, like, if you get near us, I'm gonna hurt you. I swear it. And he's like, oh, yeah, you want to see someone get hurt? We'll see how that goes. So then Lois and Jimmy are making their way down to where Clark lives. And apparently he lives literally right across from this train yard. So they happen to see this happening. And they hear this kid screaming. And the kid in the cape has his foot stuck in the rails as a train is approaching. And the dad yanks away the kid's younger brother and says, like, oh, you better watch this. This is what happens if you go against me. And the kid just clings onto the cape tightly and says, like, nothing can hurt me. Nothing can hurt me. And over just this beautiful series of panels here, Superman jumps in front of the train and just puts his feet down on the ground, a la Spider-Man 2, and just stops the train right before it hits the kid. And the kid's like, I was only borrowing it, as he hands back the cape. So Jimmy, of course, is getting snapshot after snapshot of this whole thing that just happened, and Lois is like looking on wide-eyed at the whole thing, and Superman's like, oh, this meant a lot to me. Thank you for keeping it safe. And by the way, that bully of a father of yours, he's not going to bother you anymore. I'll make sure of that. He's like, oh, can I ask you a question, mister? What does the S stand for? So then we see the aftermath. Superman leapt over tall buildings away, and Lois starts writing her story. And she looks, and she's like trying to figure out, like, what does the S stand for? And she comes up with the moniker Superman. And that's where we leave off. This was fantastic. This was like just a small little thing it's just a boy took Superman's cape, and then Superman came in and saved his life. And it was the iconography to it, the like symbolism behind the cape and all that, the fact that it was like able to protect this boy. And then Ben Oliver's art is just fantastic. I think he was the one who did the first arc in Batwing, and I was praising him constantly there. This was really, really, really good. So overall, I'm going to say this is I'm going to give it a 9, honestly. It's really, if the entirety of the run were stuff like this, of just these smaller little one-shots of Superman just saving people, I would be down for everything that came out of this series. It's so good. So yeah, not much more I could say about that. Green Lantern number 0, written by Geoff Johns, art by Doug Mahnke. This is the origin story for Simon Baz. We open up in Dearborn, Michigan on 9/11. They're watching television, seeing everything go down, and Simon and his family are a Muslim family. So things are about to get very difficult for them. The next day, we see the Islamic Center in their town is graffitied up and just covered in hateful messages. 5 years later, we see them being bullied and harassed by people at their school. 10 years later, Simon's trying to board a plane, and he gets pulled aside for some random security testing. And finally, cut to now, Simon has stolen a car. Simon is driving through the streets of his city in Michigan, and he's being chased by a bunch of cops, and he has a van that he stole, and he's like, man, this better be worth something once I shake these cops. But then he hears a beeping from the back, and when he looks back there, in this van that he stole was a bomb, a very big bomb. So he calls up his sister Sierra, gets a voicemail, and basically tells him, like, hey, look, whatever it looks like on the news, it's not true. Yes, I stole a van, but I didn't know about the rest of it. Please tell Mom and Dad it's not what it looks like. And also, I'm really sorry about your husband. I truly am. And then as he's talking, he gets hit by a cop car that's trying to do like a pit maneuver on him. He manages to get to a factory that he pulls into the yard of. All the cops stay at the entrance, making sure that he can't get out. But he pulls basically as close to the factory as he can get, bails out of the car, and as the timer ticks to 0, it explodes, destroying this entire factory. He looks around him, he's already surrounded by cops, and he's under arrest. So 3 days later, he is in Guantanamo Bay. They don't directly say it, but it definitely is that. And 2 federal agents come in, and they're basically like, all right, here's the deal. So my name is Agent Fed. This is Agent Valdez. Agent Fed, they make sure to point out, is British. I don't know why. But regardless, they basically point out to him like, okay, here's the deal. You are telling us that your story is that you stole a van, and that van, which was reported stolen 4 days before you stole it, had a bomb in it. So you're expecting us to believe that this van was stolen, a bomb was put in it, and then you stole the stolen van. And he's like, I know, that's crazy, but that's actually what happened. And they keep on laying out like all these facts against him, how the factory that he drove to was the factory that he worked at until he was laid off like a week ago. So they think this is some sort of like revenge against the factory. And he's like, no, I drove it there because I knew it was empty, because of like the weekday it was, there was nobody who was going to be in the factory. Therefore, it would have been a safe place. I had no idea how big this bomb was when it went off. I was just trying to get it away from people. And they explain like, yeah, you also, what was the thing they were saying? His brother, Nazir, his brother-in-law, Nazir, ended up dying because of something that he did. I'm not entirely sure that they say it's him, but regardless, yeah, he's not exactly happy that they bring that up. And he does have some Arabic tattoo on his arm, meaning courage. So, yeah, they're not exactly buying his case, but he just lays it out flat. He's like, look, you can keep asking me these same questions over and over again, but I'm telling you the truth. And whoever it is that was going to detonate this bomb is still there and needs to be taken care of. He is in my city. So they black bag him, take him into another room. They're basically saying like, all right, let's torture him. Let's do it. We're in Guantanamo Bay. It's literally what we do. And Agent Fed is not wanting to cross that line. He doesn't want to torture. But basically his supervisor is saying like, do it or you're like canned. If you can't do the job, then you're out. So he's like, all right, fine, whatever. So he comes in and he basically tells him like, hey, look, just talk. Just tell us what we need to know. And this doesn't have to happen. And Simon, he's like freaking out now. He knows what's about to happen. And he starts throwing punches, starts knocking down as many people as he can. And in the end, he finally has Agent Fed hold a gun to his head. And it's just like, don't move. Don't make me do that. But before anything can happen, the roof crashes open. There's an explosion of energy and a green power ring comes in. And it swoops around Simon and says, Simon Baz of Earth, you have the ability to overcome great fear. And it slips itself on his finger. He's given the power of the Green Lantern. And he just immediately escapes out of the facility. So then Agent Fed places a call to Amanda Waller, who I guess is in charge of this sort of stuff, and they're like, should we call the Justice League that a suspected terrorist has a Green Lantern ring? And it's like, nah, they're having their own Green Lantern problems, because in Justice League, Green Lantern had quit his post by this point, so they don't actually know what happened to Hal after that, not knowing that in the previous issue here, he died, so this is kind of his ring. So everyone's just figuring out what's going on. We also see a little bit of the Third Army, which was set up in the annual issue. It's just creeping through the woods at this point. But finally we cut back to Simon. He's crash landed out in some woods, and apparently there's a message waiting in his ring. And for the one-page epilogue, we see just the swirling black nothingness, and inside are Sinestro and Hal Jordan, who are apparently still alive, but they have no idea where they are. So, hell of an intro for a character, I'll give you that much. I mean, it's got deep backstory, it's got this whole thing of he's overcoming great fear. I mean, it fits. It's a good, solid intro to a character. I'm interested to see what kind of character Simon becomes based off of his past and the sort of things going on. I believe Jon Stewart had like a similar sort of thing because he was introduced just after Civil Rights era, I think. So yeah, it's an interesting take. I'm super looking forward to seeing what comes out of Simon's story. Overall, I would give this one I'll give it a 7.5. I do got to say some of Doug Mahnke's art makes it a little bit hard to follow of certain things. It's just a bit too heavy on the shadows in places, but overall it's still a very good issue, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. Earth 2 number 0, written by James Robinson, art by Tomas Giorello. This is the story of Terry Sloan. I think that's Mr. Terrific. I could be wrong. Regardless, Terry Sloan, 6 years ago, we see him crawling bloodied and bruised out of some sort of an attack, covered like shards of glass in his face, and he's asking Batman, "Oh, is this the best you can do? I'm disappointed." And then we cut back to 17 minutes earlier, where Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Terry Sloan are fighting against hordes of demonites and other apocalyptic things. And we see that apparently, yes, there was like the Trinity, which apparently had a different name. I'll get to it when I get to it. But there was also another team of people working with the Trinity that were working to fight against the apocalyptic horde. And they were called the Turnian, after Wonder Woman used it in a press conference. There were apparently 5 other people along with them. There was Robin and her mother, Catwoman. There was Supergirl. There were 2 others who he's leaving as a mystery because something happened. I don't know what. And then there was him, Mr. Terrific, the Terry Sloan, who was a super smart genius, and he was bothered by the fact that no matter what they did, they couldn't seem to get the upper hand on Apocalypse. So we see that there was some areas on Earth where the apocalyptic tech had employed mind control to all the people, and they were helping out the armies of Apocalypse, and they had some sort of quote-unquote anti-life to them. And Terry was upset because they kept on having to play softball whenever they were going into these areas because they couldn't risk hurting any humans at this area, and it was making it so that they couldn't actually do anything about it. So at this point, they were finally making a stand against that. Superman and Wonder Woman were taking care of the defenses, whereas Batman and Terry made it inside to take out the generators that were taking mind control of all those large areas. So we see that they do finally manage to make it in. They're beating through all the not demonites. I'm blanking on their names. Parademons, that's it. And they were getting through, and then finally Terry was like, okay, here's the thing. I know this mission is pointless and desperate, and I have my own plan made, but they're just going to have to wait to see it. So Superman and Wonder Woman come in to help back them up, and he's like, they came back 17 seconds earlier than I expected. That might be an issue. We'll see how it goes. So they've taken out all the parademons, and Terry turns to Superman and says, well, Superman, seems like we've done it. By the way, catch, and he tosses over this cube filled with a new form of kryptonite in it that causes Superman to go insane and starts attacking his teammates. So Wonder Woman's taking care of that. Batman's like, what did you do, Terry? And he's like, oh, it's a kryptonite I created called Opal Kryptonite. It makes it so Superman goes crazy. And also, I put it in this box that if you were to try to open it up, it will explode and be inhaled by Superman, making it impossible to cure. And then Terry explains how he opened up a dimensional portal that went through time itself, and he was able to see all these possible futures. And in some of them they won, and some of them they lost, but the fact is that they were on a trajectory that they were going to lose, and Terry had to do this in order to shake things up and get them to a point where they were going to win. And Batman's like, what the hell, man? No, that's not okay. And so they get into a little bit of a fight. And he's like, sorry, Batman, I was hoping that you'd understand. what has to happen here is we can't let these people who are mind controlled, we can't keep playing softball with them. Like, they'll keep on being mind controlled. We have to just wipe them out. We just got to take them off the map. And Batman tries his best to stop Terry. He throws a bomb that just blows up the control panel that Terry was about to walk over to. But in the end, Terry had backup plans and he ends up setting it off anyway. And we see these giant, like, truly massive explosions taking out full cities all over the earth. And it ends up being the craters that were seen back in like issue 1 or 2, these giant craters that were leftovers of the war with Apocalypse. It turns out they were actually caused by Terry. And he's like, all right, well, maybe one day you'll understand I did what I had to do, but for now I'm out. And he just bails into a different dimension. In doing so, the Opal Kryptonite deactivates, giving Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman just enough time to get out of the facility that was really, they were going to destroy it anyway. So the explosives were already planted. He just makes it so they can escape just in the nick of time. And they do so, but we see that Terry, now that they're all dead, now that everything's settled down in the war, he realizes that in this timeline he set them on, there is an even greater evil coming, something that nobody is prepared to deal with, and they've lost their strongest heroes. So now it's up to him in order to save the world, whether that means destroying half of it in order to save the rest of it. So kind of the utilitarian mindset there. It's good. It's solid. I like the way they set up Terry. He's basically, for anyone who's seen Watchmen or read Watchmen, he's just Ozymandias. Like, that's literally all he's doing here. It's fine. It's good. I'm not quite attached enough to the Earth 2 universe to fully comprehend, like, okay, how big of a deal was this? Like, yeah, no, it looks horrible. Like, they do a good job of selling how horrible it looks, but they also did a good job of selling how bad the Apocalyptic army was. So I genuinely don't know which was worse here. I feel like this was the worst part, though, and it's something drastic, but according to him, something that needed to be done. I'm just curious to see how they play out on that. I think it is going to be something that keeps on returning, because I believe the last issue of Earth 2 actually left off with Terry Sloan introducing himself to Mr. Terrific. So I'm intrigued at the very least. I'll give this issue I'll give it a 7.5. It's good. It's not amazing. It's just a solid issue. Green Arrow number 0, written by Judd Winick, art by Freddie Williams II. This is Oliver's guilt. It's the reason that he does everything, apparently. So we open up, he has a bow and arrow, and he is on an oil rig in the middle of the ocean, and he's throwing a massive party, because I guess he just brought this bow and arrow because his daddy was making him take lessons in how to do that. I don't know why. But he's just saying, like, yep, nope, I'm over on this oil rig because my dad, I got fired from a bunch of other jobs, so he just put me here to make sure that things go well here. And it's like a nothing job, but I'm making it my own by hosting massive raves of people who are flown in by helicopter to this oil rig. And he's aiming his arrow at this suit that he put an apple on top of. It ends up going into the crotch of the suit. And he's there with his girlfriend, it's Lena, and his friend Tommy Merlin. So they're both like, man, you suck at archery. And he's like, well, I just started, and also I'm pretty drunk, but whatever. So they're all just giving him crap about that. Helicopters keep flying in with more people, and the girlfriend Lena, she's like, Oliver, who's that on this helicopter coming? He's like, oh, that's Carlo Pike, the rock band guy. And he's like, I know Carlo Pike is the famous drug dealer. And he's like, yeah, but he's also in a band. He's coming in for some entertainment. And Lena is just kind of through with Oliver's shit at this point. He's like, dude, you have this whole party boy thing going on, but like, your dad made you in charge of this thing because he wants you to actually do something with your life. And yeah, you've made your point. You've turned it into an entire farce, but like, you're now just becoming a bit of a jackass. I think it's done. And he's like, oh, it's done when I say it's done. So Lena storms off, and Tommy's like, hey, you've been dating her longer than you've literally dated anyone else. maybe try not to lose her so easily. And as they're looking in at the helicopters coming in, one of them just suddenly explodes, and out of it, or maybe from behind it, hard to tell honestly, a military helicopter appears along with this metahuman looking guy named Iron Eagle. And he just comes in and he's like, well, hey, I didn't expect there to be a party out here, but add my name to the list. And they just start shooting all the guards who are around with guns and taking all the guests hostage. And Tommy and Oliver quickly make their way to lower decks. They find a maintenance guy who's down there, and basically Oliver's like, what the hell's going on? I thought we were supposed to have guards. This place is supposed to be secure. What the hell's going on? Aren't you doing your job? And the guard's like, dude, you're the one who was bringing in helicopters constantly. That completely compromised our security. This is literally all on you. And the guy basically, they have a TV on where we see that the entire thing is being broadcasted out live. The guy's making a claim. He's there. He's going to collect several millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of crude oil, and then he's just going to go. He's just a pirate. So they're like, all right, we better just let him do what he's going to do so everyone can make it out safe. And we see that he has Lena strapped with explosives and is kept at the center of this hostage pile. And Oliver's like, no way. I'm not letting him go after what he's done. We're going to make a stand. So he grabs his bow and arrow and he makes his way through. And we see him encounter like two of the other pirates or whatever who have full like assault gear. And he, knocks them out. He takes a hit on the bows and arrows. And then Oliver's like, okay, we should be right underneath them. I'm going up topside. And Tommy's like, are you an idiot? You can't even fire that thing properly. And you're going to go try to fight some like metahuman pirates? You're an idiot. And he's like, psh, don't tell me what I can and can't do. So Tommy calls him out. I'm like, is this like a screw you to your dad? Is this a hero complex? What are you doing this for? Because you are literally going to make things worse. And he's like, whatever. So he goes up. He's got an arrow drawn. He's in the shadows. And he takes a shot at the hand of Iron Eagle in order to get him to drop the detonator. And lo and behold, he actually does make the shot. And he's like, all right, cool. So he'll drop the detonator. It should, based off this angle, drop into the ocean beneath, and everyone should be safe. Super cool. So he takes the shot. It goes into the guy's hand. He drops the detonator, but it doesn't fall into the ocean. It hits the side of the oil rig and causes the detonation to go off. And then we just see one panel of Lena looking down as the bomb goes beep, and then boom, explode along with all the other hostages. So, yeah, not a good day. Tommy body slams, tackles Oliver off the rig. They cling onto some concrete, like somehow floating. I don't understand that part. But Tommy's like, you are literally going to get everyone around you killed. That is my dying message to you. As he seemingly passes away. So, same story Green Arrow always has. He washes up on an island. He starts having to actually use his archery skills to survive, and he becomes Green Arrow as the months go by. Cut to a year later. We see Roy Harper is in jail. He's somehow taken his guard's cell phone and is playing some games on it. And he's being told that he met bail. He tosses the phone back to the guard and says, like, oh, sorry. And by the way, I jailbroke your phone and got you some cool new apps. Bye. And we see that the person who bailed him out of jail was Oliver. And he's like, here's the deal, Roy. I know that you are really smart and you have an opportunity here to make the lives of everyone around you better. I want you to join my team. We're going to go out and we're going to do something special. And he's like, okay. So we see that, Green Arrow and possibly Arsenal, because it's not actually on the page. We just see Green Arrow, and it's like one arrow at a time. We're going to make things better. We're going to make up for it. And then epilogue issue, modern day, some island that has a hospital on it run by some nuns, has Tommy Merlin, who's been in a coma for all this time, but now he's finally waking up, and I'm sure he'll have lots of questions. So yeah, I don't feel like this was necessary. Like the fact that he was a playboy and like treated people like crap and like didn't take anything seriously, is enough. Yes, he should have a death or two in like his immediate family. Tommy, that would have been a fine enough death on its own. But for him to be responsible for an entire oil rig full of hostages to explode seems just a little bit too overkill on the guilt part. That's just a tiny bit too much, for me at least. And then obviously, like, I guess they assumed that we already knew the whole backstory of, oh yes, he trained on this island and he got better. Because I think at this point Arrow was already airing. Maybe not. But yeah, it just feels like a bit too much. It makes it just unatonable in a lot of ways. I don't know. That's maybe that's just me. Maybe, he's got his own thing going on at this point, but it just seemed like a bit too much. So overall, I'm going to give this one, the art was okay. It wasn't great. I'm going to give it a 6.5. It's not offensively bad, but it did just come off as a bit too grimdark, which I guess fits in with the new 52. World's Finest number 0, written by Paul Levitz, art by Kevin Maguire and Wes Craig. This is the just Earth 2 origin stories of Robin and Supergirl, who become Huntress and Power Girl. So we open up in Gotham City, where it's apparently Robin's first night out, taking out some thugs, and we see that she's accompanied by her adult guardian figure on the rooftop as she leaps down and starts taking out the thugs who are seemingly just mugging some poor woman. And they've got a gun, so we walk through her whole mental process of like, okay, take out the guy with the gun first, then focus on the bigger guy, and then move to the least threatening ones. And she works through the fight, and then finally she gets down to the last one, who has a knife to the throat of the woman, and she's like, okay, all right, I give up, I surrender. And she puts her hands up and then throws a throwing knife through the hand of the guy, having him drop the knife, and then kicks him in the face to knock him out. And the girl that was being mugged, she's like, oh, thank you so much. And she runs off. And we see that it wasn't Batman who was watching this. It was actually Robin's mother, Catwoman, who is like, oh, you've done such a good job, kitten. So she's happy to see her child succeeding, while Batman is off fighting the apocalyptian army, like all over the world, with Superman and Wonder Woman. So they're the ones taking care of Gotham. But the next morning, Bruce is back in town, and he is not happy that his daughter went out crime fighting. And Selina's fighting for Helena's sake. She's like, no, look, she did great. She did a fine job. And someone has to be here to protect Gotham. You definitely aren't available anymore. You're off Justice Leaguing and taking care of the world. Like, this is something that needs to happen. She's trained. She's watched over by me. Like, someone has to take care of this place. And Bruce is like, we agreed. And she's like, you agreed with yourself. I didn't agree to nothing. And as they're fighting, they just lean in close and start making out. And Elena's like, okay, all right, well, I don't want to be here for this. So then we cut over to Supergirl, who's practicing throwing boulders like across the ocean. And as she's doing so, Superman's like, okay, you're doing good, but you're 4 degrees off. You need to work on that. She's like, nobody's perfect, cousin. And Superman's like, yeah, but you need to be perfect. Here's the deal. Darkseid, the Apocalyptic Army, they know about me. They know about Superman. They don't know about you. We need to keep you secret, and we need to keep you under wraps until you are fully trained enough that you can go in and you can be our secret weapon. Because remember, and we see scars all over Superman's back, and he's like, they can hurt us. They are able to do that. They have that ability. And he also says, and also, I'm keeping you secret because I can't stand to lose you too. And he goes over how he lost Lois. She was betrayed in the Daily Planet building, and Superman didn't make it until it was already too late. So he's got some guilt on his own side of things. And then they have a brief conversation trying to figure out, how did Supergirl manage to stay young while Clark aged up on this Earth? And he's like, I've genuinely no idea. But anyway, there's an alarm going off. Something's happening in Rome. I gotta go. And then we cut back to Robin, who's training in the Batcave, and she sees an alarm go off on the Batcave computer. And basically, it's an alarm that apparently means that either Batman or Catwoman, someone who's out in the field right now, needs help. And they are not the type to ever use that alarm. So she knows something big must be going on. And she makes her way over to this burning building. It's a warehouse, and Batman's already there. And he's grieving because Catwoman was the one who showed up. She thought it was an arms deal, just a normal gun runner thing, but it turns out it was apocalyptic tech, and she was caught in the crossfire, and she's dead. So Batman's grieving. Robin kisses her mother's hand and then runs into the building to basically take out these guys, show them vengeance. And Batman, he's too injured. He was also caught in some crossfire. He can't make his way in. But as Robin's running into the building, he calls over the Justice League comms and says, somebody come here and save my daughter. So Robin's inside. It's very smoky. She's not able to see too far, but she's able to see some guys. She takes a few of them out, but then they more and more keep piling in. And she's like, I probably should have thought about this, but I was so caught in the moment. I'm done for. And at that moment, the wall cracks open and Supergirl comes in. And Robin's caught off guard. She's never met Supergirl. And she's like, what the, huh? And Supergirl's like, yeah, Superman sent me. Or rather, an alarm went off at his base. And he told me that I was only able to answer the alarm if Batman called. Because if Batman was to call, it was going to be super duper serious. So they're both currently hovering over the top of the building. And everyone thinks that it's Superman that swept in and saved Robin. Even Batman. He's like, oh, thank you so much, Cal. God, I needed that. So they go back down into the building and just start wrecking shop because now they've got Supergirl powers on their side. And as they make their way through, they see a portal that very quickly is vanishing in the back room. And they're unable to follow it through, but they're like, okay, so this was apocalyptic tech. That's something to keep in mind now. And Supergirl sees Robin is grieving over someone, doesn't quite know who, but it's like, well, it looks like you had an awful day. By the way, I'm your friend now, and I'm here for you no matter what you need. So, yeah, that's their first mission together, I guess you could call it. I think it was very good. They hadn't really delved in that deeply to the fact that Robin's mother was Catwoman. It was mentioned, and it's obviously known about, but this really adds an extra layer to Catwoman died as a result of this war, which doubles down on not only Batman's side of things, but also gives Robin, a.k.a. Helena, this deeper sense as to why she's fighting and why she's continuing on this fight even after she left her Earth. So I'm down with it. I think it's really solidly written. The Supergirl part of it is a little bit weaker, but her character also is a lot more playful, in the series proper. So I think it makes sense that, she was hidden away and didn't really ever get to see the severity of this war. It works for the character as well. Really, this just better informs both characters overall. So overall, I'm going to give this one I'm going to give it an 8. I'm not huge on Kevin Maguire's art, but it works for this, so I'm not that against it. That's pretty much the only thing that's really keeping it back. That, and it's not an incredible issue. It's not blowing my mind. It's very solid, though, and honestly, I think that it is worth the read here. So 8 for sure. GI Combat number 0, written by J.T. Krul, art by Ariel Olivetti. This is the final part to The War That Time Forgot, which, full disclosure, I probably should have looked ahead on, because this clearly was more so the backup story than The Unknown Soldier was, but it's too late to course correct that now, obviously. So, just briefly getting into what happens in this issue, we saw last issue that Stevens survived the fall that Elliot thought killed him. And then this just says, how did Stevens survive? And we see that as he was plummeting off the cliff, he landed in the water beneath and just survived because I guess he landed properly. But the dinosaur that he fell with also survived, so he had to put up a little bit of a fight, get some knives in the jugulars on it, and wait for an even bigger dinosaur to come up and start eating that first dinosaur. So he managed to escape off to the shore and then just basically stayed alive. He just kept moving for weeks on end. He couldn't rest. He couldn't eat. He was just barely managing to stay afloat until finally he one day he caught his own reflection in the water and he realized he was completely forgetting his entire life before this, like how his wife looked, how his child looked, how they sounded, everything like that. And after a while, he managed to take refuge in a cave, and a saber-toothed tiger attacked him. And we see he fought off the saber-toothed tiger with a mixture of seemingly kung fu and his knife, in which he stabbed it and was finally able to take some meat and say, yes, this is my life, I will survive. And that's it. That's literally the whole... Yeah, you can see why this was probably should have been the backup story, but I didn't do that. So this is, in the whole, this is a good 2-issue story, but honestly could probably be lowered down to just an oversized single issue, because there really isn't a lot to this. It seems like it's more set up to the story that they want to tell involving this character, where it's like, how did this guy get to this point? And then we're going to tell a story about his adventures in the wilderness. But honestly, this story overall didn't really seem to fit much purpose. Like, there was no overarching thing to it. Theoretically, you could say it was, oh, we have to get off of this, I was going to say island, but I'm pretty sure it's just North Korea. So, I don't know. I genuinely don't know what the point of this was. It looked fine. The art was okay the whole way through. Sometimes... I don't know if it's a colorist thing or a penciling thing, but sometimes it looks like the background is just straight up copy-pasted computer, like, generated imagery, and it's a little bit off-putting, but the people and the objects themselves are totally fine. So, I don't know. It's strange for something so short to be rated, but I guess if I had to rate it, I'd give it like a 6, in that it didn't do much of anything, but it wasn't offensive in doing it, so... It's just there. The War the Time Forgot is okay enough. And I believe next month we pick up with The Haunted Tank. Stormwatch number 0, written by Peter Milligan, art by Will Conrad. This is the kind of origin story for the whole team, but also Jenny Quantum, Jenny Sparks, Jenny whatever. So we open up at Stormwatch HQ, and the entire team is looking at some sort of weird, gross fly alien thing, and they're not able to make heads or tails of it. They have no idea what's going on. But then we cut over to Jenny Quantum, who is in her room just playing some sort of game, and she is approached by a shadowy figure who turns out to be Adam 1, who is the leader of Stormwatch, who died in like issue 5. And he just shows back up out of nowhere, and he's like, hey, it's me. And she's like, oh, hey, where have you been? And he's like, it's a long story. Anyway, I wanted to tell you a story. Do you remember how I pulled you out of that orphanage when you were a kid? And she's like, yeah, and you brought me here to my new family. And he's like, right, but that means you can trust me, right? You know I'm on your side. And she's like, I guess. So then he opens up some weird little portal viewing thing in order to show her the century babies of past. So we get the first century baby of Princess Janine in 1013, where she has all the powers of linear geometry, because that's what they were figuring out in that century. And we see that she's really good with like an abacus, and Adam 1, who at this point is extremely old looking because he ages backwards, is there telling her of her fate, how she is a century baby. And she's like, okay, and he's like, well, there's this team. It's called the Demon Knights, which is a totally different book, but regardless, they fight horrors from afar and shadowy threats and whatnot, but they do it all in secret. And we would like you to join because you are so powerful. And she's like, I don't want to. And he's like, all right, fair enough. But then her father and mother, who are king and queen of their land, are assassinated, and then evil dolphins in mech suits come out of the ocean and attack because they're fed up with humanity. And at that point, she's like, all right, guess I have nothing to lose. And she joins in the Demon Knights, which currently features Etrigan, Shining Knight, and Vandal Savage. So still the same team that we see in that book. But regardless, cut back to the present. Adam 1's like, yeah, that's me. I age backwards. I don't know if I ever really told you that. But yeah, here's the thing. Everyone here had a purpose. And we she trusted the power inside her, which again, at that point was just geometry in order to do what she needed to do. And then we then cut forward to later on in her life, because this has to have some sort of message to it. And Adam 1 is seeing terrible visions of like awful things that will happen to the team, and particularly Janine. And we see that years pass and she's going on crusades where she's killing just literally everybody because she has completely overinflated her ego as to what she's able to do. And Adam shows up and tries to warn her, like, hey, you might want to stop doing that. And she's like, screw you, tries to attack him. Doesn't work out. And it turns out that Adam 1 is actually Merlin, which I think I made that comparison before. But regardless, they really, like, confirm it here. So then the Shadow Lords are apparently watching her do this. They get sick of her crap and they send her into the Shadow Realm or whatever. And so Jenny takes from it like, okay, yeah, I get it. Don't get too big for my boots. Like, yeah, all right, anything else? And he's like, yeah, I want to show you a different one. And it was 300 years later, another century baby. She works in a monastery and she is able to access her powers via prayer. So that's kind of the thing they're doing right now. And at this point, Adam 1 has aged down a little bit, and they get into a little bit of a romantic relationship, to which Jenny Quantum gags at because she thinks that's gross. And he's like, you'll understand when you're older. So at that point, though, a giant red storm opens up over the city of Walpurgis in southern Germany. And out of it comes the Daemonites, everyone's favorite Daemonites. And they show up here, and the Demon Knights knew all about the Daemon Knights, and this is going to get very confusing very quickly, but they just basically worked to fight against them as they tried to take over this village, and there was evidence of like human experimentation and stuff like that. The people prayed for someone to show up, and the Demon Knights of that era, because they do rotate out, came forward and fought against the Demon Knights and fought them back. Sorry, the Daemon Knights. This is very confusing. So at this point, they were like, okay, but they will come back. They are going to come back again. And they're going to come in the same sort of way, in a red storm. So we must sit here and watch for that storm. Storm watch. Get it? Anyway, so at that point, Jenny's hearing some sort of commotion outside. And she's like, what's going on out there? It sounds like people are fighting. And she looks on one of the monitors and sees Midnighter and Apollo are just beating the ever-loving crap out of each other. Jack Hawksmore's just screaming in the background. And she's like, oh, I have to do something. I have to stop them. And Adam's like, hey, you got to trust me. I just wanted to show you 2 more century babies, okay? And then I'll let you go. I'll let you do what you need to do. And so he shows her the one that came in the 19th century, the 1800s, named Jenny Freedom. She escaped from a slave plantation, and she used light and steam as her powers, and she had undying courage to overcome the odds. And then there was the one that came directly before her, Jenny Sparks, who used the power of electricity in order to fulfill her role in Destiny. And her thing was that she knew how to kick some ass. So finally Adam's done showing, and he's like, okay, I'm done. By the way, nobody's killing anybody. Like, I just put that all into your head. But here's the thing. I have visions that the team is going to turn on each other, and they're all going to kill each other. And I think you're the only one who's able to stop that. So when the time comes, be ready for that, because it's definitely going to come in your lifetime. Okay? And then he shows another portal showing all the superheroes in the area. And he's like, here's the thing. Stormwatch and Demon Knights in years past, they were the only thing that was going on. They were able to do whatever because nobody else was interfering. But now we've got superheroes, and they're constantly interfering. And that makes stuff really, really complicated. So just deal with it and do your best in order to fight against the threat when it shows up. And Jenny's like, okay, well, I guess I can do that. It doesn't sound fair to me, but whatever. And at that point, Adam 1 disappears, and Jenny walks back out into the main room where everybody is, and is like, hey, is everybody okay out here? And they're all still looking at the fly monster, and they're like, oh, hey, Jenny, what have you been up to? She's like, oh, I was just watching a TV show. It's really sad because everyone's going to die at the end. And that's it. A lot of lore laid down. I don't think we've ever established that the Demon Knights led into Stormwatch. That's news to me. And then the entire Jenny thing. This is a good way of explaining exactly what a century baby is to some one who didn't quite understand like what the powers specifically are. It looks like all of them had the same sort of power set though, like this weird waving your hands and then stuff happens. But I don't know, it worked. It was a solid issue throughout. Overall, I'd say 7.5, mainly because it does feel like just here's exposition for the sake of exposition. And rather than just doing an issue set at an earlier time, they decided to do the thing of like, oh, heed these lessons that I'm sure. Scrooge, look upon your past and tremble. Like that sort of thing. So, yeah, I'm only going to give it like a 7.5 for that. But overall, still an enjoyable issue. Animal Man number 0, written by Geoff Lemire, art by Steve Pugh. This is the story of Buddy Baker, and more specifically, the Animal Man overall. So we open up 5 years ago in the Congo, where some poachers are being attacked by the previous Animal Man, who's defending the animals, and one of the poachers manages to escape with, I believe it's a chimpanzee or something like that, hops onto a boat, but of course Animal Man just takes on the form of a shark, is easily able to catch up to him and knocks him out with a mean right hook. But it turns out this poacher wasn't actually a poacher, and the poaching wasn't actually poaching. It was a trap set by Anton Arcade, who unmasks himself and immediately goes and kills the Animal Man. And he taunts the totems of the red and saying, I've killed your guy, what are you going to do about it? And we see all the totems in the parliament are just like, yeah, he really got us there. We really messed that one up. See, our next guy, our next Animal Man is not ready, and we can't really do anything at the time. So the totem that is going to become Socks the Cat speaks up and says, like, no, we need to have a champion right now. Like, we can't let the rot just move in, because currently, like, superheroes are appearing on Earth, and, like, it's a very turbulent time. We just need to be around. And like, well, literally the next one hasn't even been like conceived yet. So what should we do? And it's like, let's just make one. Let's just give some random human the abilities of the red and have them tied over until we get the next one. And they're saying like, we've never done that. It's like, well, desperate times, desperate measures. And as they look into it a bit more, they realize that, the gene pool that they're going to be pulling the next avatar from, they could use someone who's like the next one's father or mother in order to act as a protector and make sure that the next one doesn't get hurt. So they look into it and they feel it and they're like, okay, let's do it. Let's go ahead and make this happen. And as they look into it, they come across Buddy Baker, who currently is acting in a movie where he's dressed as a giant chicken and he's doing his own stunts. He's trying to leap from building to building, and he ends up taking a fall off one of the buildings. And it's shown he just lands on a stunt pad, and he's like, oh, God, this role sucks. Can I literally have anything better? I got to do something more with my career than this. And he's not getting anywhere talking to his friends, so he's like, all right, whatever, I got to go. It's my son's birthday. I need to go get him a cake. So long. So he's driving home. He calls his wife and picks up some comic books for Cliff. And as he's driving home, he sees this huge fireball go across the sky and crash land in the forest nearby. And he's like, whoa, all right, hey, I'll call you back, honey. And he hangs up, and he goes out into the woods and checks it out and sees a UFO standing there. And all the totems are watching this happen from their, little scrying portal. And they're like, what's with all the narrative? Why we got to do all this? And he's like, this guy's 40. Like, he's not going to just accept that we pull him into the red and he has powers over animals. We have to set up, like, a narrative that he can wrap his mind around, and so we're just gonna do the whole superhero thing. It's reasonable enough. So he goes inside the UFO, and their custom tailors who will make him into the Animal Man have taken the form of green aliens, and they speak some indecipherable language and then put him to sleep and start doing operations on him. And they're talking constantly to Totem, saying like, okay, how strong should we make his connection to the red? And he's just like, oh, not super strong. He doesn't need too much. He just needs enough that he can protect his daughter when the time comes. And it's like, okay, and how powerful should he be? He's like, oh, barely anything. Just be able to feel a little bit of animals' powers and whatnot. Nothing too bad. And it's like, all right, cool. So what do we do with him now? We're done. It's like, dump him in the woods. He's fine. So they put him in the woods, put a costume next to him, and then he immediately wakes up and understands exactly what's going on. He puts on the costume. He's like, all right, let's see what my powers are. And he tries to jump and fly, but he just crashes to the ground. And when he lands, he sees he's being surrounded by all these woodland critters. And suddenly a sparrow lands on his finger, and he feels this deep connection to the sparrow. And all of a sudden, he's able to fly like the bird. And he's like, all right, cool. Linked to animals, but I can fly now. So he flies back home to his home, surprises his son by knocking out outside the window and just floating around and taking his son up for a flight. Meanwhile, his wife is like, do you care to explain any of this? So we get a 2-page spread of like, oh, he's saving children and he's taking up like animal rights and stuff like that. He actually gets some big press with actual like movies and stuff like that he was doing. And that was only over the course of like 6 months. He really managed to make it go quickly. But one night he's coming home from superheroing and his wife is still awake. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I hope you weren't waiting up for me. He's like, no, look, here's the thing. I need you to be safe, buddy. Like, I need you to be safe. And it's like, oh, you don't have to worry about me. It's like, I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about us. I'm worried about us as a family because you have your father. You have responsibilities. And long story short, she reveals that she is pregnant again with the child who will become the next Avatar. Of course, they don't know that. So we then cut to outside the house, and there's a dead squirrel on the pavement, which Anton uses to look through the eyes and see that this is happening. And the Hunters 3 are all like, oh, hey, she isn't even born yet. Should we go in? Should we act now? Should we get ahead of this? And Anton's like, no, leave her alive. I think she could be more useful to me if she lives for a little bit first. Dun, dun, dun. So overall, pretty just basic origin story. I think, again, I haven't read the original Animal Man stuff. I'm sure that they, that whole green alien thing is lifted directly from there. And then this story is the one that updated it to be like, no, here's the red and here's all that stuff. So it's basically just retconning, saying that, yes, this stuff did happen, but it happened differently than you think, which was already established in the prior issues of this series. It's nothing new. Art-wise, Steve Pugh, as always, does a fantastic job. Everything looks great in here. Definitely mimics Travel Foreman's style, who makes a majority of the remainder of the series. It's just solid all around. I really don't have anything to complain about. It's nothing super amazing either. It doesn't do anything that's messing with like the storytelling perspective or anything like that. It's just a straightforward story of here's a random guy who got superpowers and what does he do with it? And for the most part, that's it. And then there's a larger backstory behind it, which is, of course, what we're dealing with in the main series. So overall, I'll say this is a 7. Just a nice, good read. Nothing wrong with it at all. Dial H number 0, written by China Miéville, art by Mateus Santolucci. This is an earlier incarnation of the Dial, and it opens up, as far as I can tell, thousands of years ago, with a old, I want to say it's a Roman army invading some sort of other land. They never get too specific in it. It seems kind of Mayan, but it's Romans versus Mayans. I don't think that happened. Anyway, we see one young girl named Laodice. She is convinced that this sundial, which is improperly made, it only has 10 segments on it, is the key to their salvation from this invading horde. And she has a few believers, a few people who are willing to help her, and they position the stone at a specific like sunlight angle, trying to get it to work. And she is just trying to desperately figure out how to make it activate. And she looks at the oncoming army, and apparently there was a being called the Mususu, which is a beast of Babylon that is being used by the invading army in order to make their attacks even more swift. It is completely merciless and kills without question. And as she's looking at this dial, it starts approaching her, and she just runs her hand on the dial in the proper order in order to get it to activate. And we see her cycle through a few possible powers before finally coming up across Bumper Carla, who is a 1950s looking woman riding a bumper car. And she immediately starts taking out the Musushu and starts engaging it in a fight. And she uses all of her like flight and electricity based powers in order to taunt it off of a cliff and ends up killing it. And after that happens, the Bumper Carla power disappears and she turns back into Laodice, and everyone's like, what the hell was that? And she's like, I don't know. I have no idea. But the army is taken care of. Like, we're done. We've succeeded. And everyone is immediately singing her praises, saying like, oh, you need to be the new queen. You were the one who saved all of our people. She's like, no, I'm not a royal. I don't want to rule, anything like that. And she's encouraged by one of her young friends saying like, all right, fine, don't call yourself a queen, but you are favored by the gods. You need to step up and help our people. So cut to several years later, and the young girl has been on an expedition trying to figure out the origins of this dial. She's been around the world, and she finally comes back, and Laodice welcomes her with open arms. And the young girl's like, yes, no, it's great to be back, but I believe that I've been followed. Somebody has heard about me asking about this dial, and I think that they have heard of it as well, and they probably want answers. And Laodice reveals that, yeah, no, there was a guy who got here 3 days before you showed up, and we've been keeping him imprisoned because we don't know who he is or what he wants. And he seems to be able to sense Laodice every time she gets near to his cage, and he screams out, Dialer, you have to listen, there's a danger. And they have no idea what he's talking about. But regardless, they arrive to Laodice's quote-unquote throne room, and we see the dial is in ruins. She's actually destroyed it. And she doesn't want to let the person out of the cage for fear of what they may do if they discover that she did break the dial. So at this point, and apparently it's up for debate whether or not she broke it or whether or not it was broken by the Musushu, but regardless, as they're sitting there in the throne room talking about what to do next with the visitor, they hear a commotion outside, and in comes to the throne room Bumper Carla, just by herself, individually, and she sees Laodice and accuses her of being a murderer and immediately goes and attacks her. And she's like, no, there's so much blood on your head. This is all your fault. This is for them. This is vengeance. And she attacks Laodice and goes up to the jail cell where there is a stereotypical looking superhuman, like superhero behind the bars. And Bumper Carla breaks open the doors, and the guy inside, she's calling him Slim. He's like, you know she's not responsible for this. This isn't on her. And she's like, no, I know it's her. I know she's the one who caused this, and I'd do it again. I'm not sorry for what I did, even if it was against the rules. And Bumper Carla then disappears into a portal as Slim is also standing there. And the young girl asks Slim, like, where did you send her? What's going on? She's like, she's being sent to be judged because she committed a crime. But apparently what happened was there's a whole bunch of worlds out there where all of these heroes actually exist. And Bumper Carla was a hero on one of these worlds that she just kept everybody safe. And she was like using her powers to like transport people around. But then for a brief couple like seconds, she lost her powers. And because of that, a bunch of people died on her Earth, all under her watch. And she wasn't able to handle that. She wasn't able to handle like that she lost her power. She thought they must have been stolen by someone. She knew that. And so she went looking and she tried to figure it out how, until finally she came across the portal to Laodice and discovered she's the one who did it. She's the one who did it. And despite Slim not believing any of this, thinking like, no, your powers just blipped out and it's a tragedy, but it happens, Slim does end up coming through the portal just to try to warn Laodice, just to try to warn her that Bumper Carla is coming for blood. And he leaves still believing that there's no way that Laodice could have done it, because there's nothing on Earth that could have done that in his mind. As we see, still the dial is broken in her throne room. So yeah, this is a huge lore dump for how the dial actually works, in terms of it just takes powers from heroes on other worlds to some extent. I mean, that's huge within its own right. We thought these were just, I don't know, either programmed into the dial or just randomly came up. But no, it's a whole thing, which it leans into the memories. You having memories of these different people. You are literally taking their identity away. And that's probably why she knew Laodice took it, was because she probably gained Laodice's memories. It's like a body swap sort of situation thing going on. Super interesting. I'm really loving how this is weaving in and not just being a stereotypical, like, oh, here's just some basic origin story that, like, whatever about it. No, this is giving us lore and telling us, like, here is something that is pivotal to the story itself as well. So definitely loving this. Anything to help me understand this series a little bit better, honestly. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one I'll give it an 8.5, honestly. I think that this issue is, if you're into the Dial H series at all, this one is probably critical in terms of understanding the origins. And again, they don't even know where this dial came from. They thought it has always been there. So while there's still mysteries, this is a good lore dump of understanding a bit more of how it works, and is probably going to be critical moving forward. So definitely enjoyed it. Phantom Stranger number 0, written by DiDio, art by Brent Anderson. This is a new comic. We're starting with issue 0, and we get introduced to the origin of the Phantom Stranger, where I'm just gonna lay this out to begin with. I know who it is. I'll say who it is at the end of the comic. They don't explicitly say it, but they may as well, because it seems really easy to piece together. So, Mystery Man, sitting in a jail cell, he says, like, yeah, here's the thing. I betrayed my best friend, and I hung myself in penance for it, and I didn't die, and now I'm being held here as prisoner. And then this shining door opens up, and it just says stand and enter. And inside we see Council of Wizards of all different denominations, and he's led before them because they're going to judge him, and he's apparently one of history's greatest sinners, and they're going to decide what his fate will be. And in front of him are 2 other sinners that are being judged as well. We know one of them is Pandora, who's been showing up consistently, and the other one is a mystery man, who I never covered the free comic book day issue, but I did read it, and it's Pandora, and this guy ends up being the Question. We don't actually know who he is before he's the Question, but he's the Question. So anyway, they're all told to kneel. The Question refuses to kneel, and he's forced down anyway. And the Phantom Stranger is the only one who's being judged currently, and he's like, please forgive me. I forgive me the same way that my friend would. And he's like, no, that's not going to happen. You've literally darkened the world with your greed and avarice. Therefore, you will be punished. And we take all of these silver coins that he has and string it up around his neck in a necklace. And then he's cast back into the real world, where now he has white hair and he has a robe next to him. And he's like, okay, what am I supposed to do? And a voice from the heavens says, like, put on the robe, your fate awaits. And so he puts on the robe, and apparently it was the same robe that belonged to his friend. And he puts it up, and everyone's like, oh, who are you? Why do you look that way? And he's like, I'm just a stranger. And he's like, oh, okay. I like mind wipes him or something so they don't care who he is. And the voice from above tells him, your penance is to walk the land until your debt for your sins is paid, and on that day you will serve the greater good. So he walks, and he helps out, like, trying to help people through and through. And finally, one day, he gets a voice from above, now in, like, today, like, modern day. And he's told, there is a man, seek him out, do what needs to be done, it is time to make amends. And he is in Gotham City. He makes his way to the GCPD, where inside there is a detective, Jim Corrigan, who's yelling at his superior, saying how his fiancée has been taken captive. He knows that it's the fault of some other detective who he has a beef with, because Corrigan ended up shooting his brother, and he thinks this is payback for that. But the officer in charge is like, Corrigan, you have such an insane temper. Like, you already got 2 strikes against you. If you do any excessive force stuff on this, I'm going to have to kick you off the job. And like, I don't trust you. I don't think you can do it. And he's like, please, it's my fiance. You have to let me in on this case. And he's like, sorry, no can do. So Jim takes his badge off, throws it on the desk, like completely cliched style. He's like, take my badge. I don't need it. And he walks out. And Phantom Stranger's like, all right, well, I guess I'm here to help Jim. So out in the alley behind the building, he's investigating some sort of like hustler gambler guy who's in deep with a bunch of people for information. And as he's about to really lay into him, Phantom Stranger shows up and says like, I might be able to help you. And Jim Corrigan's like, oh yeah, well, I've got an anger issue. So he grabs Phantom Stranger by the throat, puts a gun to his head and be like, if you know something about where my fiance is, you better start talking. Phantom Stranger is like, I didn't do anything, but I do have information. And so he just phases through Jim Corrigan and shows him an image of a flash of the future that he apparently gets, and he's just there to guide Jim in the proper way. He doesn't actually do anything himself. So he shows the fiancé being bound and gagged in some sort of area, and he's like, I can show you where. Follow me, Jim. And they make their way to an old and abandoned warehouse that apparently Jim never would have thought to even investigate. And they walk inside, and the place is completely abandoned. There's literally nobody. And Jim's like, you set me up. This is all just to waste my time, isn't it? And he's like, I swear I thought you'd be here. And at that point, some lights come on, and apparently it was a trap. And it was a trap set by the cop who he suspected in the first place. But he's got other guys who end up shooting Jim Corrigan down, and he's now dead. And as Phantom Stranger is holding his body, he's like, I don't think this was supposed to happen. We see Jim Corrigan's spirit come out of his body as a spirit of vengeance, a.k.a. a specter, and he is now completely dead set on killing Phantom Stranger. And as soon as he's about to launch into his thing, he's like, you will feel my wrath. He's just snapped out of existence by the voice from above saying, no, but others will. Phantom Stranger's like, what was that about? And we see one of the silver coins drop from Phantom Stranger's necklace and just disappear. And Phantom Stranger's like, okay, all right. So it's not about me helping, like, people in need. You want me to help you set up your plans, whatever they may be. And this Jim Corrigan guy turning into a specter was part of those plans. Okay, all right, I get it now. I don't like it, but I get it. All right, I guess I'll keep doing that. And that ends the issue. Okay, spoilers. I'm going to only say this once, and in every future issue, I'm just going to say it outright if it comes up. He's Judas. He's Judas Iscariot. He killed Jesus, 30 gold or silver coins, and he hung himself. That's pretty straight up. I don't really feel like they were trying to hide it that much, but regardless, he's Judas. So, yeah. In terms of setting this up as a intro, not only to the series, but the character as well, I think it did a good job. I think it said exactly like, okay, here's who Phantom Stranger is. Here is what his goal is as a character. And then a vague definition of his power set. I think I would have liked a little bit more of showing what he can actually do in order to help. Because clearly I feel like he's just unable to interfere with like the physical world is his thing. Like he's just kind of floating around, but he can still be seen and heard. At least that's what I'm picking up. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's something around that. Anyway, in terms of rating, I would say this is probably this is 7. It's good. It's a solidly written enough story. It's not great by any means. It's just it's a decent story to introduce the character that I genuinely don't really know much about. So see how we manage to evolve it over the course of the series, and of course how it interferes with the other 2 sinners that were judged in the beginning as we move into future events. Swamp Thing number 0, written by Scott Snyder, art by Kano. This is just the origin story of Alec Holland as Swamp Thing. So we open up in Manitoba, Canada, 1897, which is having an extremely harsh winter. Even going into the early months of April, it's still no green anywhere. And this little girl is trudging through the snow trying to find the Green Man who brings spring wherever he goes. And after trudging through the snow, finally she came across the Swamp Thing of that time, which picks up the girl, carries her into a nearby cabin, and heals her back up using fruit from his own body. And as the girl wakes up, she's like, the cold, I came because the cold is killing everyone. And Swamp Thing's like, oh, well, I'm sorry. The cold still has a little bit to go, but don't worry, spring's around the corner. And she's like, oh, I don't want spring to come. I want you to let it go on forever. He's like, what? Why do you... Oh, crap. And then the girl reveals that it's actually Anton Arcane, who's hiding inside this girl's body. And he surprise attacks the Swamp Thing, who's also very weak because of the snow, and just immediately kills him, crushes his head in between his jaws, and he loves every second of it. He genuinely thinks that was the best kill he's ever done. So cut to Louisiana 6 years ago. We have him posing as a scientist next to Alec Holland, who is proposing a toast because they finally made some headway on a biorestorative formula that's able to restore the green into literally any situation. They have a greenhouse that's set to 125 degrees Fahrenheit, and there's still a tree growing in it perfectly fine. So it'll be a beautiful leap forward for bringing the green everywhere. And Anton recounts how absolutely many Animal Man and Swamp Things he's killed over the decades in order to establish the predominance of the rot. And sometimes the parliaments do a good job of hiding who their candidates to become these are, but sometimes they don't. And when they don't, Anton is literally able to get them from their cribs and just kill them as they are children. And he has absolutely no problem with that at all. But Alec Holland, they hid him until he became far too old to do that. And also, he's apparently supposed to be like some actual point of like major power and like legend to them. So he's definitely one that he wants to take care of. So using the scientist body, he sneaks into the Holland's home, and his wife is there, or I should say Alec's wife is there, and she attacks him thinking that he's some sort of intruder. And she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Jesus, what happened to your face? And we see his face has been all slashed up, and Anton's like, well, this skin's done for. Time to take yours. And he just straps on the wife's skin, grabs a knife, and then tries to find Alec, who is still out in the lab looking after some more notes. So we see him studying over them, and she comes in. She's like, I say she. It's Anton Arcane, but I'm going to say she. She comes in, and she's like, hey, so why you should be getting to sleep. And he's just like, I'm sorry, I can't. Like, all my life, I felt like this green has been calling to me. Like, it wants something from me, and I'm just hoping that this is it. Like, I can finally be free of its call if I just do this last thing. Like, that's all I want. And she's like, oh, don't worry. I'm sure you'll be done soon enough. Tee-hee-hee. Anyway, I'm going to go back to bed now. Goodbye. He's like, oh, okay. And hey, thanks, honey. And she's like, no problem. And then immediately she ducks behind some flammable liquids, turns on the valve to let it all out. And once it's properly seeped over the ground, she sets it on fire, and therefore setting the entire cabin on fire. And she looks on as Alec explodes out of the burning rubbish of the cabin, completely ablaze, and throws himself into the nearby swamp to try to put himself out. And Anton is just taunting the parliament, saying like, oh, go ahead, try to turn him into Swamp Thing, but you're too late. He's already dead. He belongs to the rot now. There's nothing you can do. And the parliament looks on, and he's like, crap, he's right. Yeah, totally got us up on that one. We were so careful, and yet here he is, already dead. Oh, that sucks. Until one tree speaks up, and he's like, actually, hold on. There might still be a chance if we're just patient. We might be able to still use Alec Holland. And they show 5 years pass, and all of a sudden Alec Holland's hand is outstretched from the swamp, and he is now able to be the greatest Swamp Thing that has ever walked the earth. So I don't know how that happened. I don't know what, maybe that was an Alan Moore thing, pre-New 52. Maybe that was something they established and I forgot about, but I'm still not sure how they managed to have him be dead and unable to be Swamp Thing, and then also be Swamp Thing. I know it had something to do with his memories being swampified. I don't know. It's something. It's a good issue, though. I really do like the layouts. Kano does a great job. Swamp Thing has always been good in terms of layouts, so no big surprise there. But No, art-wise, it looks great. Narrative-wise, tells a good story. The early Swamp Thing at the beginning of the issue was the same Swamp Thing we saw in, I believe it was Animal Man Annual. So it was a nice little callback there of a little bit of continuity between like which Swamp Thing is which and how it continues on. I genuinely do think that the Swamp Thing Animal Man pair up, both those stories are fantastic in terms of how they link together and how they're telling a bit of a larger narrative combined than they either could individually. And Swamp Thing is definitely holding up its end of things there. So overall, I'll give this issue, I'll give it an 8. I do think it is very solid. I think it is worth a read. But the whole run is. This one issue is just a good, not even entry point, but just a good installation within an already fantastic run. So definitely check it out. Night Force number 7, written by Marv Wolfman, art by Tom Mandrake. This is the final issue of the miniseries, and I guess it wraps it up. Probably. So we ended last issue with Zoe being kidnapped, Duffy being saved from a fire by Winters, and the bad guys seemingly winning. I guess, again, this is a very confusing story to read. So far apart from each other. It's really more of a binge read thing. Anyway, Winters is standing over looking at Duffy as he wakes up. And then he's like, okay, hey, you're awake. Cool. I genuinely have no more use for you. Go home. And Duffy's like, no, Zoe, she was captured. We have to save her. Take me to where she is. And he's like, I don't know where she is. Take me to where she is. I don't know where she is. Take me to where she is. Dude, I don't know where she is. And he's like, fine, I have an idea. I want you to send me back in time to the night my father died again. Okay? And he's like, all right, sure, whatever. So he sends him back once again to that night. He sees inside where he and Zoe appeared the last time. And then Simon the Harvester comes in and kills his father. Same as it always was before. However, this time, Duffy's standing on the other side of the house. And he manages to, as Simon is escaping, tackle him, grab him, and then have Winters bring them both back into the present. So then Winters is like, oh, cool, yeah, he probably knows where Zoe is. All right, I still don't have any more use for you, and I don't need you to interrogate him, so I'm going to send you to your retirement party that is going on right now. And he just boops him away over to the bar where people are like, hey, congratulations, you're leaving, oh, that's great. And Jim has no time for that. He immediately makes his way out of the bar, calls a taxi, and makes his way back to the Winterscape Manor. And when he walks into the room where Baron Winters is, he's currently interrogating, quote-unquote, Simon the Harvester, which is really just ripping his soul from his body and getting information that way. And Baron Winters they explained, like, yes, these are souls. Yes, they are real, but don't touch them because they're very violent or something like that. But anyway, he does manage to get the information for where Zoe is. So we cut over to the evil team. I still don't have a good name for them. And the senator that they were using, who's been getting migraines, his migraines are now debilitating. He is unable to perform the tasks they need him for. And it's revealed that they actually did like a mind wipe on him to make him think he was a senator. He was actually just like a bum in the streets that they've just been recalibrating and reusing because he's really good seed in order to further propagate their species. But he comes in, they come into the room and they're like, okay, like, we're running out of time on this guy. I don't think we're really going to be able to use him. So we gotta get him to impregnate Zoe again, like now, in order to get our final level, our number 10. So they spit Zoe out of whatever cocoon they were holding her in and says like, okay, do it, which I don't think it has to happen, birds and the bees style, because all of a sudden, Brian, the senator's, his eyes start glowing, and he's just blasting Zoe with the energy that's coming out of his face. And I think that's how babies are made. So we cut to Jim, who's making his way through the building. He comes across a young baby on what seems to be a sacrificial altar, and he's like, oh, hey, this baby's probably Zoe's. I'm going to save this baby. So he grabs the baby. Zoe, she's finally done with putting up with this. She smacks the senator in the face, which is enough to snap him out of his delusions. And he goes and attacks his quote-unquote wife, who's actually the one who's orchestrating everything. And she's like, all right, well, I definitely have no time for this anymore. And she uses whatever internal energy she has in order to blast the senator away. So he's gone. He's off the table. They did everything that he needed with him. So at that point, Baron Winters is sitting in his estate, and he feels that one of the Night Force has died, which I guess is the senator. I didn't know he was a part of, like, that's news to me. Anyway, Zoe is now in the crosshairs of the woman running everything, and she's about to be, like, taken down so that they can hold her until the baby is born. But then Jim comes in with a gun, holding her first baby, and saying, like, she's getting out now. And he's wearing the charm that Simon had, that his father also had around his neck. It's so confusing with the time travel. But regardless, the woman jumps at Jim. He just shoots her in the head, and that's apparently enough to kill her. And because she was so powerful when she died, she starts blasting her soul energy everywhere, killing pretty much everybody around. Jim, the baby, and Zoe make their escape out the back of the building. And Baron Winters teleports them back to the estate. And it's just like, okay, cool, you guys did it. Great. So yeah, you guys can go. And it's like, wait, is this my baby? And it's like, yeah, that's your baby. We can check the DNA if you want. And she's like, nah, I believe you. So now she's got her baby back, and Baron Winters is like, seriously though, I'm done with you. Get out of here. So Jim is teleported back to his retirement party, and he's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I can enjoy things. Why not? And he shares a beer with his friends. And then Zoe gives Baron a little kiss on the cheek, hops in a cab, and makes her way back home. And he's like, all right, well, I guess I probably shouldn't have told her that she is actually already pregnant again. Like, that was enough to impregnate her. So, oops. But we'll let her have a few days of calm and peace. In the meantime, let's go ahead and see what else is going on in the world. And he reads the Book of Night and sees, I guessed what's coming up next. We're not informed. Okay, I've been saying consistently that this book is very confusing. I understand the beats to it. I understand what one side wants, what the other side wants. But I feel that the greatest lacking of this book is terminology. In that, I don't know what the bad guys were called. I think it was Darklings. But, like, they had all this terminology that they only ever really used once. And then just expected you to remember it. And that's really a problem with a monthly comic that's confusing as this. Add in the time travel stuff and how history is always already written. Like, it's not a thing where it's a splitting timeline. You go into the past and then something new happens. Like, everything that has happened has always happened, including your time travel. And that's always super confusing unless you very linearly lay out, like, here's how it went. So, yeah, it's not a bad book. It's just kind of a confusing one, and the confusion then leads to just me not giving it as much care as I feel I would other books, because I'm just so detached from the plot as a whole. Art's okay, no real issue with that. It's just, this book, I felt like it wanted me to come into it with earlier understanding from something that happened before issue 1, and I didn't have it. I had no idea what was going on, and therefore this book left me behind. So overall, this book is kind of going to feel the wrath of having to cover the entire series in its rating, but I am going to give this one only a 5.5, honestly. And that mainly comes to the fact, if I'm just looking at this one issue, it climaxed with the fact of he brought a gun and shot her in the head. Like, that's it. That's how we took out this threat that has apparently been taking over America, if not the world, for 200 years, is he shot one of them in the head. It's just a little bit of a letdown on my side of things. But regardless, it was a miniseries I never would have read if not for this show, and I don't think I will read again afterwards. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this September 5th, 2012. And for anyone watching the video version, yes, I now have a cat on my desk. I literally could not stop him from jumping up during this scene. Anyway, in terms of comics that came out this week, I gotta say, I think I'm happy Night Force is over. I know I just talked about that one, but yeah, it was really a trek to get through those last couple issues. Everything else, good to okay. It was nothing that was that standout, except for that Action Comics issue. Really did enjoy that. But let me tell you what's coming out next week, because 0 month treks on whether we like it or not. We have the number 0 issues of Batgirl, Batman, Batman and Robin, Superboy, Green Lantern Corps, Deathstroke, Grifter, Suicide Squad, Team 7, Legion Lost, The Ravagers, Demon Knights, Frankenstein, Agent of Shade, and Resurrection Man. Additionally, we have the number 12 and final issue of The Shade. The only one that's really of note there, I believe, is Team 7, because they have been making reference to that in many different comics, and we're finally going to understand what in the hell they're talking about, because I gotta tell you, I know nothing about Team 7. But if you have any thoughts on those comics I just listed, the comics I talked about today, or any comic ever, or my cat, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at DC Comics Podcast, all one word, at DC Comics Podcast on Twitter. Additionally, we have the Patreon you can put some money into. You will not see any return on your investment there, but it is at Patreon, Mild Fuzz TV, all one word, Mild Fuzz TV. Thank you very much for joining me at the start of this new year of the show and the start of 0 month as a whole. I hope that you have enjoyed today's episode, and I hope you'll join us next time. Thank you very much, and always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.